Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. I'm Rex Nelson, senior editor of the Democrat Gazette, and just delighted to have today Judge Raymond Abramson of the Arkansas Court of Appeals, but we're not going to talk anything legal today, Judge.
Good. You don't want to know what opinions are coming out next week?
No, we're probably, you're probably tired of talking about that anyway. We're going to talk Delta. You, of course, a native son of Holly Grove, Arkansas, continue to maintain a home there after all of these years. You grew up in an era before we saw the extent of the population losses that we've seen now. You grew up in an era when cotton was still king in the Arkansas Delta. Talk a little bit, I'm just interested to hear a little bit about the Holly Grove that you grew up in.
Well, before I do that, thank you first for having me here.
I love talking Delta, as you know.
It's an honor and a privilege to be in the same room with my friend Rex Nelson.
Well, thanks, Judge.
And I appreciate that. And I also want to say that I love that Delta bluesy music that you play as a prelude to these interviews.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
It makes me feel at home.
There you go. You go.
Yeah. Well, as you said, my family came to Holly Grove in 1870.
Wow.
Actually, my great-grandfather and great-granduncle, Rudolph Abramson, and his brother Dave Abramson, actually were riverboat denizens, and they plied the riverboat trade with their wares, dry goods, up and down the Mississippi and White River back in the post-Civil War days. And then in 1870, they found paradise. They landed at Lawrenceville, Arkansas, which was the first county seat of Monroe County, and liked it, and debarked from the ship they were on and started a dry goods store there.
Wow.
And the family's been there ever since. Something happened, so Maddox Bay, which is where Lawrenceville is, which I'm sure you're familiar with, a great hunting and fishing area.
Oh, it really is.
Is only about 5 miles south of what the present town of Holly Grove is, and that was part of the White River at the time. And then sometime between 1865 and 1870, there was some traumatic earth event, either a flood or an earthquake or something that changed the course of the White River.
And left Maddox Bay as an oxbow rather than the main channel,
left
right?
Maddox Bay and Indian Bay and Green Lake and that little string of oxbow lakes kind of from Clarendon down towards St. Charles as oxbow lakes. And so their riverboat traffic dried up.
Yeah.
And fortunately for them, the railroad built a line from Helena to Clarendon right about that time. So they decided to move their little dry goods store 5 miles up the road from Lawrenceville up to Holly Grove. And they prospered from there.
You mentioned 1870 and the years after the Civil War, and certainly speeding up after Reconstruction. We started to see all of the virgin hardwood timber cut out of the Arkansas Delta.
Right.
Large parts, as you know, of St. Louis, Chicago, where those cities were built with timber that came from Arkansas. Right. So, to this day, people have a hard time visualizing. I'll drive them from here to Memphis and say all these giant row crop fields were once almost impenetrable hardwood forests. But obviously that took a lot of people, because first you had to cut the timber and then drain the land and then turn it into that massive cotton producing country that it became. So a lot of people were needed for that work. Salesmen were needed to sell goods to those tenant farmers, sharecroppers. And thus you got, and I want to break this down with you because I'm fascinated by the cultural mix of the Delta. I grew up in southwest Arkansas, where my joke is, my hometown of Arkadelphia. Now I'm exaggerating, of course, but I say you're either a white Baptist or you're a black Baptist. There's not much in between. But in the Delta, You had the Jewish population, you had Chinese, you had Italians, you had Lebanese and Syrians. It truly became a melting pot, did it not?
It certainly did. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and back at that time, Holly Grove was a bustling little cotton town. And we probably had in excess of 1,000 people who lived in town with lots of. We had two main streets, and they were chock full of retail and commercial establishments. And
to be clear, one was basically the white Main Street and one was the black Main Street.
No,
is that right?
No, actually, in Holly Grove, it was really all white. But my memories of the 50s and 60s were that on Saturdays, all of the farmers from the surrounding area,
would come to town.
And white, and I remember them driving their mule wagons in there. Some of them have one mule in the wagon, and some have two. But they would drive the wagons in from their farms, and they would furnish up for the next week.
Yeah.
And it was both black and white. There was, though, as you suggest, a black area of the town, but as I recall, there were few commercial establishments there. There were some, but not very many. So there was a lot of both blacks and whites in the downtown area doing their shopping and so forth.
I love old photos from that era. Now, your ancestors were Jewish immigrants to this country. Is that correct?
That's correct. So both Dave and his brother Rudolph came from, it was Prussia at the time.
Prussia, I remember you telling me, and I couldn't remember just then.
At the time that their father sent them out to America for a better life, and the original family name was Shinajevsky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
spell that for me right
I can. It's CZ.
Okay.
I want to think that I'm somehow related to the coach of the Duke basketball team.
Yeah, exactly. Coach K, we say for short.
That's right. The apocryphal story about how we became Abramsons is that these two young men, when they came to America, they probably did not speak any English.
Right.
And when they arrived, and we believe that they arrived at the Savannah port, people talk about arriving in Ellis Island, and a lot of immigrants did, but we believe that my ancestors arrived at Savannah because we found citizenship papers from Macon, Georgia. In any event, we believe that the customs agent, when he was taking down their information, like you and I, had a hard time understanding and spelling the name Shinajevsky, particularly that started with a C.
Right.
And so our theory is that he said, "Okay, boys, what was your dad's name?" And they said Abraham.
So they were sons of Abraham.
Sons of Abraham.
Yeah.
So that's the way we think that it happened.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
So again, that river, the Mississippi, of course, and its tributaries, the Arkansas, the White here in Arkansas, those were great interstate highways of their era into the interior of the country. And so, as I mentioned, that cultural mix, we saw a lot of people in the Arkansas Delta coming up north from New Orleans, coming down south from Cincinnati, St. Louis, and so forth.
Yes. So we believe that my ancestors plied the Mississippi River trade, and so they came downriver.
Downriver, okay.
Yeah, and then they'd get to the White and went up the White, which is how they ended up in Lawrenceville, Monroe County, Arkansas. But yes, the Arkansas Delta had a lot of Jewish immigrants at the time, a lot of Italians, as you suggested, and a lot of Chinese. Holly Grove had just our one family of the Jewish immigrants, but from time to time in my childhood, I remember another Jewish family being there, but they didn't stay too many years.
Okay, so your I did not realize that your family was the only Jewish family there in Holly Grove.
And
because I know there was, of course, now part of the Delta Cultural Center, but there was was a thriving synagogue in Helena nearby.
I was just going to say, so my ancestors were part of the original founders of the Temple Bethel in Helena, which is now the Bethel Heritage
Center. Part of the Delta Cultural Center.
Yes, and so I grew up, and my father grew up, and his father grew up going to that temple on religious occasions. And so our family was Helena-centric back at that time. So there was a thriving Jewish population in Helena. In my childhood, going to Sunday school at the temple in Helena, there were families from Marianna, from Marvel, and from Clarendon that also went there and had the Jewish presence there. There were a couple of families in Marianna, the O'Mell family, and most of them were in retail. I remember Ronnie O'Mell had Ronnie's stores there, and his brother Steve, and you have a Little Rock.
Buckley's here. I was going to say a lot of our listeners will probably know Buckley O'Mell.
Yeah, he is the scion of that family.
Right.
And in Marvel, the main Jewish families were the Hirsches and the Davidsons. Then, like I said, in Helena, there are quite a few Jewish families, and sadly, there are literally none left now. There are no Jewish families left in Helena at this time.
Yeah, I remember when our friend David Solomon passed away, as Mr. Solomon, who I loved writing about him, and went over for his 100th birthday celebration, lived to pass 100. But I remember you telling me at that point, you said basically, I guess I'm the last of the old Delta Jewish lawyers left around.
Exactly right. Kent Rubens, of course, was a very prominent Jewish Delta lawyer. Oscar Findler up in Blytheville.
Very well-known name if you followed Arkansas news through the decades.
Right. And Harold Sharp in Forest City. And that was about the extent of it. And then I was the last of them. You
were the young one.
The young one. I was several years younger than any of them, and I'm the only one left.
Wow. We mentioned also the Chinese. I have found it so interesting, that part of the Delta culture. In fact, last year, we were talking about this at lunch recently. My friend John T. Edge, who runs the Southern Foodways Alliance at Ole Miss, called me. He does a show I know a lot of our listeners will be familiar with called True South, which runs on the SEC network. But they go and they kind of they'll focus on 2 or 3 restaurants, but that will be part of a larger story about the culture of an interesting Southern community. And he asked me, he said, where would be a good place in Arkansas? And I told him Lake Village, because Lake Village has a Chinese-American mayor, Joe Dan Yee.
Sure.
And, of course, John T. was already familiar with Miss Rhoda's hot tamales, which are famous there. So, and then a place called Cowboy Steaks, which is inside a pizza restaurant. And again, Cowboy is Chinese also. So it made for a great show, that Arkansas Delta cultural mix. And John T. Edge told me it was probably his favorite of those shows that they did last year. But Joe Dan's brother Bill Yee and I worked when I was at Simmons Bank together. A lot of people, again, here in Arkansas, because of the heavy advertising she does and all, know of his wife, Suzanne Yee, and she hails from Holly Grove. That's what I was going to lead you into. Yeah.
Well, Suzanne is the daughter of Buck and Margaret Wong.
Okay.
Buck and Margaret had a grocery store right next door to my family's store on Main Street in Holly Grove.
Gotcha.
And they were one of 3 or 4 Chinese families, all of whom had grocery stores. The C2 family had a grocery store on the other side of the street, and the Lee family also had a grocery store. Of all of those, Sid Lee is the only remaining Chinese and progeny of that, and he still lives in Holly Grove, and he is a Cracker Jack ace car mechanic there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, again, part of that just fascinating cultural mix. Now, it doesn't come as a surprise to anybody who keeps up with what's going on in Arkansas, and that we have now seen decades of population loss in that region. The way I simplify it, and it's simplifying, but it gets to the basis of it when I speak, is I talk about the mechanization of agriculture, and I pull a number out of the air and say, say you owned a cotton plantation in East Arkansas before World War II, and it would have taken you 200 tenant farmers and sharecroppers to raise a crop of cotton, because this time of year in the summer they had to be out there chopping cotton by hand.
Right.
In the fall they were picking cotton by hand.
Right.
And then because of all of the research and development that went into the war effort and affected every segment of the American economy, we got improved seed varieties, we got improved insecticides, we got improved herbicides, and we got the mechanical cotton picker.
Yeah, technology has just increased many-fold.
So suddenly, what had taken you 200 before, you could do with 20 now, as you well know, because you're still involved in some agriculture.
I am.
I mean, you can farm that same amount of land, I'd say, with 2 or 3 people.
Exactly
that
right.
may have once taken 200.
That's exactly right. So to further your hypothesis, there was a kind of mass exodus of the laboring class back in the 50s and 60s and continued into the 70s to mostly northern cities, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, for factory jobs.
That's
a lot
right.
of them
Jobs
went into the automotive industry, but there was the diaspora of that working class. A lot of them went to Denver. A lot of them went to Los Angeles. They all come back to Holly Grove on the 4th of July for family celebrations.
So that's reunion time.
It's reunion time, and we have the population of Holly Grove explodes to about 20 times its regular population.
So was there a good crowd this 4th of July?
Huge crowd. And they have
That's great to hear.
Have a parade, and this is also a kind of a late phenomenon. Some of those folks who had moved, whose families had moved up north, have retired, and they're starting, a few of them, to come back and retire in Holly Grove. Obviously, the cost of living is a lot lower
exactly.
there.
Exactly.
And some of them still have family there. So it's a good thing. We're not seeing a lot of it, but some of it.
One of the things, and I used to have to use this a lot the years I was with the Delta Regional Authority, people just say, poor old Delta. And what I'd have to explain is the land is more valuable than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. It just takes a lot fewer people. Our farmers truly are the best in the world at what they do.
Absolutely.
In this part of the country. And it takes a lot fewer people. And I don't think, if you live in an urban area like here in Little Rock, I don't think you should be so quick to write off an area like the Arkansas Delta. As I remind you, the largest segment of the Arkansas economy remains agriculture, and therefore it is crucial to the future of our state.
Our row crops are better than ever. Obviously, a lot of that agricultural end product is in poultry now, too, which we don't have a lot of in the Delta. But, Arkansas still is the first in rice growing in the nation, grows nearly half of all the rice in the nation. The cotton industry has kind of had peaks and valleys from the 50s, but cotton is still a very solid part of the agricultural picture in the Delta. Just as you talked about the mechanical abilities creating efficiencies and technologies creating efficiencies that need less people to work, the same phenomenon with cotton gins. There used to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 cotton gins in every little town, Holly Grove included.
Oh, yeah.
And my family had one of them. But now I read something in the paper the other day, and these numbers aren't exactly accurate, but like as late as 10 to 15 years ago, there were like 130 gins in the Delta, and now there are 30.
That's right.
Yeah. So
I wrote a column a year or so ago about an individual in Fayetteville whose project is traveling around Arkansas shooting photos of abandoned cotton gins, and he is planning to put those in a coffee table size book.
Wonderful.
Which I think will really be interesting, because you can drive, as you know, East Arkansas and see those abandoned gins all over the landscape, dotting the landscape.
Well, let's tell him to come to Holly Grove, and I'll show him around.
All right. That sounds great.
And treat him to catfish.
Yeah, there you go, which you have done for me, and it is very, very well worth the drive if you get an invitation from the judge to come to Holly Grove.
It's the best ever.
Now let me break down.
Let me follow up. You asked me, and I got sidetracked, as I am wont to do. But in my childhood in Holly Grove, the downtown area was bustling. Shops and stores and people coming to furnish for the week. And I remember on Saturday night, there was a movie theater there called the Grove Theater, which my dad ran.
Wow.
And we have some of the remnants of that, which is real interesting. This is from a child's eyes and a child's perspective, but on Saturday evenings when we would quote unquote go downtown, which for me was like 2 blocks away.
Yes.
It was shoulder to shoulder people there.
Wow.
And in my early days in the 50s and early 60s, there were still people who came in with their mules and wagons for the day to do the shopping and the entertainment. They'd go to the movie, a matinee maybe. All the Westerns were popular then. Then in later years, either the retail shop owners scattered away, or economic matters prevailed, and the downtown commercial area, probably in the 70s and certainly into the 80s, is where you saw the vacant storefronts and all of that, which sadly still persist.
I was going to break down Northeast Arkansas versus Southeast, because the Arkansas Delta obviously is much bigger geographically than the Mississippi Delta, for instance. Northeast Arkansas, I do a cover story for our Sunday Perspective section once a month. I did it on Mississippi County in June. You've got the explosion of the steel industry,
mills,
which is great for Arkansas, to go along with what is still a very important county for row crop agriculture. Of course, nearby Jonesboro is booming. Paragould is booming. They've kind of grown together. I call it the Jonesboro Paragould corridor. And then I look at attractions that'll bring people in. The tallest building outside of Little Rock now, this trivia question now is getting people on a regular basis. They're not getting the answer right. They're going to guess Northwest Arkansas. No, it's in West Memphis. It's the new 21-story hotel at Southland. That's the tallest building outside of Little Rock in Arkansas. You take that, you take the expanded Sultana Museum, for which funds are being raised.
Yeah, our friend John Fogelman is running that. Yeah.
Absolutely. You take what's been done with the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home at Dice. You take everything that's being done at Wilson, which is just incredible what Galen Lawrence is doing there.
Yes.
And then you've got the attempts to do a Cold War museum at Acre Air Force Base in Blytheville. So you got a real quarter of attractions. So I think there are a lot of positives in Northeast Arkansas, to me at least, and in my columns, as you know, and everything else, I try to take a statewide perspective. It seems to me Southeast Arkansas is a tougher nut to crack, Helena all the way down to Eudora. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think you've put it in excellent perspective, exactly how you analyzed it there. Helena, of course, they've been struggling with moderate success with various industries and tourist attractions there, and of course with their riverboat heritage, with their Confederate War heritage, with the Confederate Cemetery there, and some of the attractions that they have in Helena. Of course, now recently the Elaine Massacre Monument.
Exactly,
there,
that has been placed just across from the courthouse.
Yes, and with our friend David Solomon Jr. leading the way for that. But yes, from there south, of course, there's still kind of the swamp wilderness between Elaine and DeShay County.
Oh, that's true. I mean, where the Arkansas River, the White River, and the Mississippi all come together.
Converge.
You know, it's what William Faulkner would refer to as the Big Woods, and it's the largest remaining tract of the old big woods, which used to run down both sides of the lower Mississippi River. That is, as you well know, that is still wild country, and the only place where our native bear population survived.
That's right.
All the mountain bears you see were brought in by the Game and Fish Commission.
That's exactly right. And the bear hunting industry is not quite mature yet.
Yes, but we were once the bear state. We had so many here.
That's right. Around Holly Grove, and of course we have the White River Refuge and the Cache River Refuge close by there, and we still see a lot of bears wandering around through the farmlands there. But yeah, you're right. That's a wonderful natural and animal and plant refuge there. But then you go south from there, and until you get to Lake Village, there's not much economic activity other than row crop agriculture.
Right.
Yeah.
But as we just mentioned, it's such wild, beautiful country, a lot of that. And I'm really optimistic about the Delta Heritage Trail. The Walton Family Foundation, of course, supplemented state money with a $20 million grant. Another $20 million grant came from the federal government. That's going to be finished now in the next 4 or 5 years.
And we're hoping that'll bring ag tourism and ecotourism.
Absolutely. You've got the old railroad bridges over the lower White, over the lower Arkansas River. And because of what the St. Francis Levee District has done, and that was another of my cover stories a few months ago, allowing bikes on all their levees. And as you know, the O'Harahan Bridge in Memphis was redone for bicyclists. When that's completed, and what our friend Robert Moore's done down in Arkansas City, when that is completed, you will be able to go from downtown Memphis to Arkansas City in far southeast Arkansas totally on designated trails. And I have to think that's going to be a national attraction for cyclists.
It certainly should be. Probably not in the summer months in Arkansas.
That's true. That's true. The buggy months, as we call them in the Delta there.
Right. But certainly in the spring and fall, and really even in the winter time, because our winters are not nearly as harsh as some of the northern people are accustomed to. But hopefully that will generate businesses and attractions up and down the Mississippi River on the Arkansas side there. Absolutely.
It really will. You know, I'm just, even with the population losses, one of the things that does my heart good, and I'm not just blowing smoke at you, that people who were raised in the region like you continue to keep plugging. I mentioned Robert Moore, who's chairman of the Arkansas Highway Commission. People like that. You still have some very strong leaders in this state, as you know, who really love that region, and I know one of the long-term goals you have is to kind of reactivate the Arkansas Delta Council as kind of a lobbying voice for the entire region. You and I and some others have been over and visited with everybody at the Mississippi Delta Council. And that's a good model because, as you know, Mississippi Delta Council is a real political power in that state.
It is, and I see no reason why we can't duplicate that in Arkansas. As you say, we have some terrific leaders, both younger and older, in our area, and I think that if we work fairly hard and get some organizational efforts going, that because there are people all through the Delta who want to see the Delta prosper.
They do.
And they are eager to help in any way. And I think just having a little bit of leadership to establish an organization that would allow everyone to come together under a common cause and a common banner would go a long ways toward helping us have a group like the Mississippi Delta Council, which in its present day iteration is quite a power economically, culturally, politically, and I see that in our future there, and I hope to further that goal here in the coming years with your help.
You know, I tend to be a glass half full guy, and I have to believe that the tremendous success, and I mentioned the steel industry in Mississippi County. Of course, first we saw Nucor Yamato, two separate plants in the Blytheville area, and then Great Lakes, and then Great Lakes is bought by U.S. Steel and expanded. Now U.S. Steel is beginning construction on what is said to be the most modern steel-making plant ever built in the world, and it's going to be in the Arkansas Delta. So you've got four major steel plants. The leading steel-producing county in the country is in Arkansas. Most people wouldn't get that question around the country,
sure.
But it's now in Arkansas. I have to think that success can send a message long-term, perhaps, to other businesses around the country that it is a good place to do business.
Yeah. And just going on down the river in Helena, they've been developing the port area there for a number of years, and I think it's just a matter of time until they click and find the right business
Something
partner
big locates there. Yeah.
I don't know that it'll be steel, might be an automotive plant, something like that, and that will, again, spur further development. But these are the sorts of things that I think take a more comprehensive and group effort to accomplish, and that's why I believe that an organization that encompasses all of the Delta counties with some common leadership, some common vision, so a common mission would help to lead our area to a lot of progress economically, culturally, and in many ways.
If we can get past this dadgum pandemic, which has messed up so many lives for over 2 years now, I know you're planning a big anniversary celebration for your family businesses there, and I'm really looking forward to that, I want you to know.
Well, thank you so much. We really are. My family company, our Abramson Company, as we talked about at the beginning of this show, was established in 1870, and so in the year 2020, we celebrated our 150th anniversary. We had planned to have a big
in
celebration
2020, right?
In 2020, in April of 2020, and the pandemic hit in March, and so we had to postpone it. And now we're hoping to get back to that and do it hopefully this fall. Stay tuned for further details, as they say.
Gotcha. Judge Abramson, thank you. Thanks for all you do for our state.
Oh, my pleasure, and I return the compliment to you. You are such a treasure for our state, and you're honored and revered everywhere you go. And
you're too kind.
And we appreciate your leadership, and particularly your wonderful columns.
Oh, thank you. Well, go Delta. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rex Nelson of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. This has been the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette.